In my previous video, I talked about order of operations, and I talked about how we simplify expressions. And we'd use this little mnemonic, GEMDAS, to help us to make sure we're using the order of operations correctly. Today, in this video, I want to talk about solving equations, and we're still going to use GEMDAS, so I'm going to write that here. But we're actually going to be going in the opposite direction. We're actually going to go opposite in order to solve. And right here I'm going to write solving. So I have this equation, -8 equals s divided by 4 plus 3. And we want to solve for a variable s. So the first thing I want to do is let's just go ahead and we're going to complete this flow chart to help us keep things straight. So when we first were talking, if we were doing GEMDAS from left to right, then that means we're simplifying. So in this box I want to write simplifying. So when we simplify, or when we're simplifying, we're going to start with the G, the E, the M, the D, the A, the S. Today, however, we're going to be solving, which means I'm going to do this backwards. I'm going to look for adding and subtracting first, multiplying and dividing second, exponents, and then grouping. I'm going to do it backwards. So the first question I ask myself, and let's write this here, is are both sides of the equals simplified? So let's write that down. Are both sides of the equal side simplified? Okay, so let's look at the problem that we have. So I'm asking, is both sides of the equal side simplified? So if I'm going to look at the left side, I have -8. That's simplified. There's nothing more that I can do with that. If I were to look at, let me use a piece of paper here, this side, the right side of the equal sign, I have s divided by 4 plus 3. I cannot combine those. I cannot divide. There is nothing I can do to simplify that. So that means when I asking this questions, are both sides of the equal side simplified? The answer is yes. Both sides are simplified. So then I'm going to ask myself this next question. Is the variable being grouped? Is the variable, I'm going to call it variable term, being grouped? Okay, so when I'm looking here, I'm asking myself, is this in a parentheses? Is it underneath the radical sign? Is it being grouped? And the answer is, well, you could say it is because it's being divided, or you could say no, it's not because it's being divided. It all depends on how you look at that. So let's just write down the question right here. We're going to write, is the variable term being grouped? And we're going to look at one where the variable term is being grouped after this one, and that might make it very clear to you. And the answer is no. So initially when we're doing these, I do want you to write down these questions. You're going to use your flow chart. You're going to write down these questions and answer them as you go. So this becomes a part of your memory. So the answer is no. So when we look at our flow chart and it says, is the variable term being grouped? The answer is no. So right here, we're going to highlight the variable term. Okay, so we're going to highlight the variable term. So where is our variable term? Our variable term is the s and any number being multiplied or divided to it. So that is our variable term. Okay, so now the question is, now what? So let's look at our flow chart, and when we come to our flow chart, we're going to write do GEMDAS, and we're going to do GEMDAS backwards because we are solving for the variable term. Okay, so now we want to solve for the variable term, which basically means we're solving for whatever is highlighted. Okay, so this is the first thing we're going to do with GEMDAS. When we're doing it backwards, we see adding and subtracting comes first. So we ask ourselves, is anything being added or subtracted to the variable term? Okay, so again, when you're working out these problems, I want you to be writing these down until they've just become old hat, like your name. So the answer to this is yes. Okay, so what is being added or subtracted to this variable term? Well, 3 is being added, isn't it? So yes, we have a 3 being added, don't we? So I'm going to put a plus 3 there. That means I want to get this plus 3 to turn into a 0. So in order to do that, I'm going to subtract 3. And what I do to the one side, in this case my right side, I have to also do to my left side. Left side of what? Left side of this equal sign. So if you have a little bit of difficulty keeping things aligned, we want to make sure that our equal sign doesn't move. We want to keep our equal sign right there. So we're not going to move that equal sign. So I introduced a negative 3 here, which means I'm going to introduce a negative 3 on the other side of my equal sign. So I have negative 8 minus 3. That gives me what? That gives me a negative 11, which equals, well, this turned into a 0, didn't it? So I'm just left with s divided by 4. Okay, so I want to look at this a little bit differently before we go on. I can rewrite this s divided by 4 to be something times my s. So in order for this to be s divided by 4, if I were to multiply this by 1/4, 1/4 times s is the same as s divided by 4, isn't it? I'm going to just bring down this negative 11. Okay, so now I'm going to ask myself in question, my third question I'm going to ask myself, so I don't have anything more being added or subtracted to my s right here. Now I'm just going to highlight the variable. Don't have anything else being added or subtracted, but I'm going to ask myself, do I have anything being multiplied or divided? So, is anything being multiplied or divided to the variable? Okay, and the answer is yes. Doesn't matter which one. These both are actually the same. The answer is yes. we can either say here it's being divided by 4, or we could say it's being multiplied by 1/4. Okay? So let me just say yes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write this side by side right here. And we're going to do it both ways so that you can see it comes out to be the same. So I'm going to write negative 11 is equal to s divided by 4, which is the same thing as negative 11 is equal to 1/4 times s. Okay? So we're going to do this. It's the same problem, just written in two different ways. So in this case, when answering this question, I'd say yes, s is being divided by 4. So if s is being divided by 4, that means then when I want to multiply it by 4. I want you to notice that that 4 is upstairs in the numerator because this is 4 divided by 4, which is 1. So my negative 11 also gets multiplied by 4. Okay? So that means then 4 times negative 11 is negative 44. This here is 4 divided by 4, and I want you to think of 4 divided by 4. That divides out to 1. So then I'm just left with s. Bring down my equals and s. So that's my answer. Let's do it on this side and see what we get. Well, what do I multiply to 1/4 to get 1? I have to multiply this by 4, or 4 over 1. It's reciprocal or inverse. And here, I'm going to do the same thing on this side. So then that means I have negative 44 is equal to, well, 4 times 1/4. This is the same thing as 1. So 1 times s is simply s. So why did I show you two different ways? Because you need to start being able to think of s divided by 4 is the same as 1/4 times s. Oftentimes it's easier to multiply than to divide. So we need to start thinking about what can I multiply to simplify rather than what can I divide. So that's one reason I did it that way. In the next video, I'm going to show you a little bit more complicated problem. It's